How far would you go when your family's land, the soil your ancestors bled for, is marked for erasure? Most people in Alyssa Grant's small Georgia town thought racism was a thing of the past, until a noose appeared in her barn, until silent threats became organized attacks. But the men who came for her land had no idea. They weren't hunting a helpless widow. They had awakened a retired Special Forces sniper, and what started as intimidation would soon ignite a resistance no one saw coming. The wind moved slow across the Georgia lowlands, stirring the tall grass in quiet waves. Alyssa Grant stood on the edge of her porch, a chipped mug of black coffee warming her palm. The morning mist curled along the tree line that bordered her family's land, a farm her grandfather had carved out with bare hands and an old rifle slung across his back. She liked the stillness here. The world didn't rush, it breathed. Behind her, the farmhouse stood sturdy, not fancy, just honest wood and nails passed down through generations of black ownership, a defiant testament in a county that had tried, again and again, to erase families like hers. Her son Malik, 16 and sharp-eyed, called down from his room upstairs. He was arguing with a podcast again. Something about history, about how the truth got bent to suit whoever held the pen. Alyssa smiled softly. He was too young to carry so much weight in his mind, but she understood. She had once been the same. By 7, they were on the road in Alyssa's battered Ford truck. The feed store was quieter than usual. The young clerk wouldn't meet her eyes. The older man at the register, Trent, with a face reddened by too much sun and worse opinions, shifted uncomfortably when she asked about the hay shipment. Still stuck in Madison. Truck broke down, he muttered, scratching his chin and avoiding her gaze. Alyssa held his silence for a moment longer than was polite, long enough for him to glance nervously at the younger clerk, who gave a tight, uneasy smile. As she signed the invoice, her eyes caught a small, hand-lettered sign pinned behind the counter. Locals first, always. Back in the truck, Malik frowned. Did you see how he wouldn't look at you? I saw, Alyssa said quietly, and I saw the sign too. They drove on. At the gas station, a man leaned against the ice machine, white, mid-50s, cigarette dangling from his lips. He didn't glance at her. He stared. His eyes moved from the Black Lives Matter sticker on her back window to Malik, who was stretching near the pump. Alyssa stared back. She didn't blink. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. They drove home in silence. As they turned onto the dirt road leading to their property, something felt off. The sun was higher now, casting long shadows across the fields. Then she saw it. The barn door, open. She knew she hadn't left it that way. Stay in the truck, she told Malik. He didn't argue. She moved slow, boots quiet on the earth. Her blade rested at her lower back, another hidden in her boot. Old habits. Inside the barn, pale light sliced through the wooden slats, striping the dust. In the center, hanging from the rafters, was a noose, frayed rope, rough, used before. Behind it, carved deep into the wooden beam with a knife. Time to go, girl. Alyssa didn't flinch. She didn't touch the rope. She stepped back into the sunlight, locked the barn door behind her. At breakfast, she cooked like always. Eggs, grits, orange juice. She served Malik without a word. His eyes searched hers. You gonna tell me what that was? No, she said softly. Not yet. But in her mind, the message was already clear. They thought she would run. They didn't know Alyssa Grant. By noon, Alyssa had traded her work boots for military-grade ones and pulled on her old utility vest. Malik knew better than to ask questions. His mother had only ever taught him what he needed: observe, listen, move. She went to the old cellar beneath the farmhouse, smelled of oil. Her rifle was there, sealed in a hard case, an M4, scoped, suppressed. She checked every part, lubed the mechanism, not for show, for readiness. Then she closed it again. War, she knew, was not won with bullets. Not first. She made calls, not to the sheriff, not yet. Old friends, retired, some answered, some didn't. Those who did spoke with a tired edge that told her they'd seen trouble brewing too. One down in Sandersville whispered of fires. 3 black-owned farms in the past month, all ruled as accidents. No follow-up. Alyssa hung up. She drove to the county courthouse. The records office smelled of mildew and stale coffee. Behind cracked glass, a clerk nodded without speaking. Alyssa sifted through property sales over the past 18 months. The pattern emerged like bruises beneath pale skin. 6 black-owned properties had changed hands. Fast sales. each following an incident: fire, vandalism, or a sudden disappearance. Buyers, shell companies. Names that meant nothing but all traced back, eventually to one entity: New Dominion Futures. Alyssa scanned the fine print. Deeds signed under distress. Notarized by the same 3 names, again and again. Outside, the world went on. People picked up groceries, stopped for gas, waved to neighbors. But behind the curtains, a machine was grinding away at families like hers. She scanned and copied the pages, folded them into her coat, nodded to the silent clerk on her way out. Her next stop was Ridge Hollow, the last black community holding on in this part of the county. The sign at the town entrance had been shot up years ago. No one had bothered to repaint it. The Wilkins house sat near the edge of town. Alyssa pulled up expecting to see Evelyn Wilkins on the porch, rocking in her chair. The house was empty, porch steps caved in, windows boarded, a yellow eviction notice flapping in the wind. She stepped out of the truck, tore down the notice, looked for signs, tire tracks, footprints. There were none. It wasn't just deserted, it had been erased. By the time she got back to the farm, Malik was waiting on the porch, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes wide, searching. "Where were you?" he asked. "Everywhere," she said. "You found something." She nodded. "Too many things." That night, sleep didn't come. Alyssa sat at the kitchen table. A county map spread before her. Red circles marked each farm that had burned, each family that had left. She drew lines between them. The pattern wasn't coincidence. It was a strategy. Like the ones she'd studied overseas. Coordinated displacement, pressure, then removal. She clicked open the sheriff's website. Sheriff Dalton Price. His smile was too wide. Too wide in the photo. He hadn't returned her call. She hadn't expected him to. Alyssa went back to the barn and walked the perimeter of her land, boots crunching frost. Her hand ran along the fence posts. Near the western boundary, someone had cut the wire. Clean. Fast. They weren't just testing her, they were preparing. They thought they were hunting an isolated woman. They didn't know they were waking a soldier. By the next morning, Alyssa had stopped hoping for help. She started preparing for siege. She walked her property line again, this time planting tripwires low in the grass. She reinforced fences with barbed wire pulled tight enough to sing when touched. Every post she touched became a marker. By dusk, she had mapped 4 blind spots, then filled them with motion sensors scavenged from old hunting cameras and broken drones Malik had collected over the years. When he asked why, she didn't explain. She showed him how to move without sound, how to fall without injury, how to breathe without trembling. They practiced at dawn, then again at dusk. Tin cans at first, then apples, then moving targets made from old scarecrows strung on pulleys between the trees. Malik missed more than he hit, but his frustration never cracked into complaint. Alyssa saw something else behind his eyes. Not fear, but understanding. He wasn't trying to be brave anymore, he was becoming ready. The next evening, Reuben Cole arrived. He didn't knock, he just stood at the gate, arms crossed, eyes narrowed beneath a weathered cap. Once he'd been Staff Sergeant Cole. She'd followed his orders overseas. Now he followed hers. "I've got 5 willing to stand," he said simply. 4 veterans, 1 still active but on medical leave. "We've been watching the county too." Alyssa nodded. She stepped aside and let him in. That night, the barn became a command center. She laid out her old maps, her rifle, her sidearm, satellite images printed in black and white, markers, radios, spare vests. The 5 Reuben had brought were older, silent. People who carried themselves like they had once walked through fire and lived to teach others how to avoid the burn. "We have limited ammo and even less time," Alyssa began. "This isn't about attack, it's about survival. If we stand together, we hold them. If we scatter, they'll pick us off one by one." One of the men, a brick-built giant named Terrence, nodded. "You the one they used to call Crossfire?" Alyssa didn't answer directly. She just said, "I hit what I aim at." That was enough. They trained before dawn, past sundown. They learned the land, moved through fields like shadows, dug trenches where needed, set fallback routes, silent signals, no uniforms, no ranks, only resolve. Malik watched, then joined. Clara Holloway arrived 2 days later, the retired nurse, known more for baking than battle, but she brought a field medic's kit that was far from civilian. Trauma dressings, quick clot, old tactical supplies with faded military stamps. "You served?" Alyssa asked quietly. 28th Medical, Kuwait, Fallujah. Spent 6 months with the Delta unit. Clara replied without pride or apology. Didn't think you'd need me until now. Alyssa nodded. You were right. That evening, a brick shattered a barn window, wrapped in barbed wire and soaked in kerosene. A strip of bloody cloth tied around it. Alyssa didn't flinch. She carried it to the kitchen sink, lit a match, let it burn until every thread became ash. They think we're scared, she said calmly, more to herself than to Malik. They don't understand what fear really looks like. The next day, Malik moved like someone twice his age. His hands no longer shook when he chambered around. His breath didn't catch when Clara showed him how to pack a wound. And as the sun sank low, the watchers reported back from the fields. Movement, small groups, testing the fences, probing for weak spots, not yet attacking, just pressing. It wouldn't be long now. Reuben's voice came through the comms that night, steady but edged with what Alyssa recognized as the weight of men who had waited long enough. They're watching us, waiting for us to blink. Alyssa's answer was quiet. Controlled, then we won't. The first battle was coming, but this time it would not catch them unprepared. The night was too still. Alyssa stood in the barn loft, rifle steady in her hands. The thermal scope hummed faintly against her cheek as she swept the field to the west. The world below lay quiet. Too quiet, no wind, no crickets. Even the goats stood frozen, clustered near the fence. Her instincts didn't lie. They were coming. The first sign wasn't movement, it was absence. The night sounds had stopped. Nature was holding its breath. Her calm crackled softly. Reuben's voice, calm. Controlled. East Ridge, 2 figures, testing the fence. Hold, Alyssa replied. Do not reveal position. She turned the scope southeast. Shadows flickered between the tree trunks. Low, careful, advancing in staggered steps. More than scouts this time. Malik's voice came through next, tight with focus. North fence. 3 more, moving slow. Alyssa nodded, though no one could see her. They're probing, looking for soft spots. She adjusted the field of view, tracing faint blurs of heat that weren't there an hour ago. Movement rippled in the grass, low crawling shapes. Practiced. This wasn't harassment, it was formation. The air snapped suddenly, a sharp, clean crack. A round struck the outer fence, splintering wood and wire. The first shot had been fired. Alyssa's breath slowed. Her finger settled on the trigger. The first figure emerged fully into view, weapon raised. She didn't hesitate. One suppressed shot whispered through the dark. The man collapsed, silent. Another shape lunged forward. She dropped him with the second shot. In the comms, Reuben's voice remained steady. Confirmed contacts. Returning fire. Gunfire erupted across the field. Controlled bursts, no panic, no wasted shots. The attackers moved in squads, covering fire, leapfrogging forward. They communicated with hand signals and flashlight blinks, tactics meant for veterans, not common thugs. But Alyssa's people didn't scatter. They answered with precision. From the grain silo, Terrence opened fire, his rounds measured. From the dugout behind the root cellar, Clara directed civilians into fallback positions while keeping pressure on the advancing enemy. Malik hunkered behind the well wall. His rifle up, breath even. Stay low, Alyssa whispered into the comm. Cover the west gap. Wait for 2 targets. Don't fire early. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The firefight escalated. Muzzle flashes tore through the dark. Bullets struck dirt, fences, and the occasional spent can that Malik had left hanging as a sound trap. But the attackers weren't reckless. They advanced in waves, tightening a noose around the barn. Alyssa adjusted her scope, scanning for the leader, the man coordinating the assault. There, near the stone wall at the eastern edge. Taller than the others, rifle ready, his posture unmistakable. Alyssa aimed. The first round struck just below his shoulder. He dropped instantly. His team froze. Their advance faltered. From her calm, Reuben, they're stalling. Loss of command. Good. Press that advantage, Alyssa replied. But the battle wasn't over. A scream cut through the western trench. Paul, one of Reuben's crew, was down. Clara broke from cover, moving like she had on foreign battlefields decades ago. Low, fast, fearless. Alyssa covered her, dropping 2 more assailants with precise shots. To the east, Malik called out over comms. Flanking! 2 targets! Alyssa pivoted, catching the first just as he tried to vault the broken fence. 1 shot. Gone. Malik followed her lead, firing a heartbeat later and taking down the second. He didn't cheer. He didn't flinch. He was ready. The enemy wavered. Movements grew sloppy. Timing broke down. They hadn't expected this much resistance. And they hadn't expected her. Another figure darted through the smoke, a runner, trying to regroup what remained of the assault team. Alyssa tracked him, exhaled, fired. He fell hard. Murmurs rose among the enemy lines. Not battle commands, not courage. Panic. One final shout echoed from the tree line. Fall back. But it was too late. The traps Malik and Reuben had set along the fallback routes snapped shut. Tripwires triggered smoke bombs. Barricades funneled the retreating attackers into narrow kill zones. Alyssa's team didn't pursue. No one wanted vengeance. Just survival. By the time the last of the invaders scrambled back into the woods, the eastern fence stood torn, the ground littered with brass casings and bodies. The defenders held. The barn, the house, and the land remained theirs. Malik joined her in the loft. His chest rose fast, adrenaline still pumping, but his hands were steady. "You good?" Alyssa asked. He nodded once. "Better than them." She rested a hand on his shoulder. The smallest smile touched her lips, but her eyes stayed sharp, scanning the dark. "This was the first wave," she said quietly. He understood. "There'll be more. And we'll be ready." The night air cooled as the smoke settled. The defenders regrouped. Reuben reported light injuries. Paul would recover. Clara had already stabilized him. Terrence was resetting perimeter alarms. They had survived the first assault. But Alyssa knew the enemy hadn't just tested their defenses. They had tested their resolve. And they had found it unbreakable. The dawn after the first assault was gray and cold. No victory songs. No celebrations. Only the quiet weight of what had been earned and what was still to come. Alyssa knew it. Garrett Slade would not accept failure. He would not retreat into silence. He would return, with more men, more firepower, and this time he wouldn't just be trying to scare them off the land. He would be coming to erase them. By noon, Reuben confirmed what they feared. His network spotted 2 convoys moving in from the county line. Blacked-out trucks, armored plating, not farm equipment, not civilians, tactical vehicles. "They're splitting into 2 columns," Reuben said grimly. "One flanking west toward the town, one heading straight for us." Alyssa spread the new map on the barn table. "Then we won't wait here. We'll meet them before they can crush Ridge Hollow." She called everyone in. Clara, Terrence, Reuben's crew, Malik. No one hesitated. No one wavered. They didn't see themselves as soldiers, but they had become defenders. By choice. By necessity. Alyssa's plan was simple. Divide, delay, defend. The attackers would expect fear, flight. They would find coordination, precision, purpose. That night, the defenders moved into position before the enemy arrived. Reuben's team took the north barricade. Clara and Terrence fortified the schoolhouse courtyard. Malik led a younger unit, 3 sharp-eyed teenagers who had grown up with stories of the civil rights marches, now living through a battle their grandparents had warned them could return. Alyssa climbed the old grain tower. From that height, she could see it all. And then, they came. The first truck rolled in under the cover of night, headlights killed, men in tactical gear, spilled out, coordinated, confident, their steps sharp, their weapons raised. Slade was with them. She spotted him instantly, taller than the others, confident stride. His rifle cradled like a man who believed no one could touch him. Not here, not now, not by people he saw as victims. But Slade had never understood resilience. He had mistaken quiet for weakness. He had mistaken survival for surrender. The defenders let the attackers advance deep into the town square before the first trap sprung. Malik triggered the smoke charges. Gray walls of mist burst into the street, blinding the front squads. Reuben's unit opened fire from the church steeple. Precision shots. No chaos, no wasted rounds. The attackers hesitated, but only briefly. Slade barked orders. They regrouped. Moved toward the schoolhouse courtyard. That's where Clara's team waited. Hidden behind reinforced barricades, they answered the assault with controlled bursts of fire. Clara moved among the younger, steady hands treating wounds, loading fresh magazines. Her years in war zones had not been for nothing. Alyssa moved too. She slipped down from the grain tower and into the alleyways, rifle drawn. Her path circled the attackers like a hunter weaving through a forest. She picked off targets with single, quiet shots. Every fallen man reduced the enemy's advantage. But still, the weight of numbers pressed in. The attackers pushed toward the center of town, toward the courthouse, the symbolic heart, the place where land deeds had been stolen behind closed doors. Slade led the charge himself, and Alyssa was waiting. They collided in the courthouse square. Slade's remaining men spread out, trying to flank the defenders. But Alyssa's training had prepared them for this. Reuben's crew cut them off. Malik's group held the eastern alley. Slade realized too late, his tactical advantage was gone. His formation scattered. Only rage remained. He raised his rifle toward Malik. Alyssa moved faster. Her shot struck the barrel, knocking it sideways. The bullet missed Malik entirely. Slade staggered back, fury darkening his face. "You think you've won?" he roared across the square. Alyssa stepped forward, calm, measured. "No, we've just begun." Slade lunged. Not with a rifle now, with a knife. Close combat, his last desperate card. But Alyssa had spent years in places far darker than Ridge Hollow. She let him close the distance, then sidestepped, disarmed him with a twist, and struck hard. Slade hit the ground. Mud splashed up around him. He tried to rise. She pinned him, her knee pressed into his back, her voice quiet, cold. "You came to erase us, but you forgot. We don't leave." Slade's limbs trembled beneath her. Not from pain, from defeat. The last of his men were already retreating into the dark, scattered by a community they had thought too fractured to resist. Alyssa didn't kill him. She didn't have to. She stood. And behind her, Reuben, Clara, Terrence, Malik, and the others closed in. They didn't speak. They didn't cheer. They stood, together, unbroken. The battle was over, but the fight for justice was just beginning. The sun rose quiet over Ridge Hollow. No sirens, no applause, just the steady rhythm of boots on gravel, the low murmur of neighbors accounting for neighbors. Alive, standing. Alyssa Grant walked the courthouse steps as dawn stretched gold over the broken square, her rifle slung across her back, her breath steady. Garrett Slade had been taken into custody, not by outside law, but by the people he had once tried to erase. Reuben's team stood guard until the county deputies arrived, hours late as always. Slade didn't speak. His fight had burned out. What remained was just weight and defeat. By noon, reporters gathered near the church. Not the big networks, just local crews. The ones who had shown up when no one else would. Cameras worn, tripods dented. Alyssa didn't give speeches. She gave truth. She held up a flash drive. It contained everything: property deeds, surveillance footage, emails linking New Dominion futures to a string of land thefts across 3 counties. The names of families erased by paperwork and intimidation. The war wasn't just waged with guns, she said quietly. It was waged with signatures and silence. She didn't name herself a hero. She named the community. Reuben, Clara, Terrence, Malik. The elders who had refused to leave. The teenagers who had stood their ground. The survivors who had found the courage to speak. "We stood not because we wanted a fight," Alyssa continued, "but because the only other choice was to vanish." No applause, just nods, and a heavy, knowing silence. The files spread fast. Within 48 hours, federal agents arrived. Not to arrest the defenders, but to seize records from New Dominion futures. Warrants were served. Offices raided. Shell companies unraveled. Dr. Veronica Hales, the woman who had orchestrated the entire operation from behind nonprofit slogans and boardroom glass, was taken into custody at a private airstrip 2 counties east. She wore the same polished blazer she had worn on every brochure. Her hands were cuffed, her eyes forward. Cold. Silent. Alyssa watched the footage but felt no triumph. Justice wasn't a feeling. It was a weight lifted. In the weeks that followed, land deeds were restored. Families returned. Ridge Hollow began the slow, quiet work of healing, not rebuilding what had been, building what should have always been. The church hosted town meetings, not sermons. Plans. Training continued, not because they feared another attack, but because they understood now, readiness was not paranoia, it was survival. The fields Alyssa once patrolled with a rifle now held rows of planted vegetables, corn, tomatoes, okra, new roots. Malik built a drone station near the silo. Not for war, for watching the land, protecting what they had earned. Clara reopened the clinic. Reuben helped teach patrol tactics to the young. Terrence organized fencing crews. No titles, no ranks, just work. On a quiet morning, Alyssa and Malik walked to the edge of the property. The same path where it had all started. The barn stood repaired. The noose once hung from its rafters had long since burned. But the beam remained. Scars and all. A reminder. "You think they'll ever try again?" Malik asked. Alyssa rested a hand on his shoulder. "Someone always will, somewhere. But not here, not while we breathe." They stood together as the wind stirred the fields. Not in fear, not in anticipation, in peace. Hard-earned, unyielding, the kind that stays. The fight for Ridge Hollow wasn't just a battle for land. It was a battle for the right to exist without permission, to stay, to endure, and to pass down a story that says, we will not be erased. If you believe that standing your ground matters, even when the odds are heavy, comment 1 below. If you believe in rebuilding, in community, and in quiet, determined justice, comment 2. And if you want to hear more stories where the overlooked become the unstoppable, subscribe now. Tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss.